Orestes. Do you need your PowerPoint right away? No. Okay, all right, let me know when. All right. Oh, you want a mic?
Greetings.
Greetings.
Reverend Deb, Unity of Kona. It's an honor to be here. Unity is our spiritual home, so we feel so comfortable here with you guys. And we've been here for over a week, and we've explored a lot of the island. It's absolutely our favorite. We went to Kauai last year, and nobody gave us the memo that in Kauai during the winter it's raining. So we left Eugene, Oregon with the freezing fog and got there, but it was beautiful nonetheless. Beautiful island, but we like this one more. So today I'm going to share how the 5 Unity principles reverse aging, support happiness, and promote longevity. And I want to start off with a brief story. When I was a resident at Mayo Clinic, I was seeing a lot of premature death. I was seeing heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, heart failure, and people dying when they were 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and dying of preventable and even reversible diseases. But then one afternoon I was at the clinic, and one of my patients was 101 years old. And my job at that time was to determine if she was lucid, if her memory was sharp, and I pulled out my pen and paper and I was going to administer the mini mental status exam. And then the first thing she says to me is, "Doc, I like a good joke." So I put my pen and paper down. I said, if she can tell me a joke, she's lucid, because that's one of the first signs of cognitive decline. When you start having memory loss, you lose your sense of humor. So I said, tell me a joke. So she tells me the following. There's a 9-year-old boy going to church one Sunday morning, and as he's going up the front lawn, he sees this big picture with American flags all around the border, and there's these handsome men inside the picture, and he's confused. Then the minister walks up at that moment and says, "Young boy, those are all the men who died in service." And the boy says, "The 9 o'clock service or 11 o'clock service?" How many have a fear that with age comes memory loss? I certainly. How many want to live to 80, 90, 97, 100 with the perfect brain, perfect mind, and in good health? I certainly. Well, I would like to share with you today how the 5 Unity principles can help us achieve this goal. The next picture is of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, and they were born in the 1850s, and at this time, the average life expectancy was 39 years of age. Charles lived to 93, and he cured himself of a childhood disability, and Myrtle, she had TB, and she cured herself of TB and lived to 86, which is absolutely remarkable. The objective of my talk today is to review the 5 Unity principles as a reminder and put it in an easy to remember format. Then I'm going to share with you what science has confirmed that these 5 Unity principles support health and longevity. And then I want to give you guys a friendly challenge to see how each and every one of you could see if you can apply these principles on a daily basis. This is our challenge for the new year. So the next slide is, I've put the 5 Unity principles in an easy mnemonic for you guys to remember. I always challenge my kids, what are the 5 Unity principles? And I like it to roll off the tongue. It's love, so they have to say it rapidly. So the first principle is live your truth. Everybody say, live your truth.
Live your truth.
One presence, one power.
One presence, one power.
Validate when you meditate and pray.
Validate when you meditate and pray.
Experience is created by how we think.
Experience is created by how we think.
And there's a spark of divinity in everyone.
There's a spark of divinity in everyone.
having coffee, I might quiz somebody. And ask them what are the 5 principles. So that's a broad overview. Now we're going to dive into each principle in a lot of detail. So the first unity principle is live your truth, because knowledge is not enough. When you live your truth, you create peace, equanimity, and health in your body. You're creating an ease. And modern science has showed us that when you do this, you're decreasing stress, you're decreasing inflammation in your body, you're decreasing cellular aging, you're decreasing C-reactive protein, which is part of systemic inflammation, and you're promoting the hormone of youth, DHEA. On the other hand, if you don't live your truth, there's an ancient word that's called prajnaparada, which means it's a crime against wisdom. So if you don't live your truth, you're committing a crime against wisdom. And what happens when we don't live our truth? Well, we create disease, the opposite of living our truth. Then the question is, well, how can we live our truth on a daily basis? And I love this story by Mahatma Gandhi. So about 100 years ago, this story was told that a mother was frustrated with her 12-year-old son who was eating a lot of processed sugar. And she said to him, "Stop eating so much processed sugar, it's bad for you." And he never followed her advice. So the mother took him to see Mahatma Gandhi, his idol. It was a long trek, 5-hour journey in the hot sun. When she got there, she told Gandhi, "Tell him processed sugar is bad for you, it's bad for your health." Gandhi said, "Come back in 3 weeks." 3 weeks later, the mother brings him back in the hot, scorching sun, the 5-hour trek. And Gandhi looks at the boy and says, "Stop eating processed sugar, it's bad for you." So the mother was baffled and perplexed and says, "Why didn't you tell me this 3 weeks ago?" And Gandhi's reply was, 3 weeks ago, I too had a sugar addiction, and I wasn't qualified to tell him that. So this is a powerful story that we must put our knowledge into practice every day in our life. And that's walking the walk, and that's a great story that Gandhi illustrates there. To finish this principle, I want to share with you a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. "Who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying." In other words, when we live our truth, nothing needs to be said. And the next principle, the second principle, one presence and one power, God the absolute good. This principle, modern science has already discovered that we are all interconnected. We are all one. You can call it God, life force, love, presence, spirit. Call it whatever you want, but science has called it, we're interconnected, there's one presence, one power, and the butterfly effect illustrates this point. So if a butterfly in Hawaii flaps its wings, 2 weeks later there may be a hurricane in Miami. That's how interconnected we are in the universe. So a small change has a profound effect. This principle reminds me of ahimsa, which is nonviolence. Gandhi had another great quote. He said, "The greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the treatment of its animals." So I asked myself, if we know this truth that we're all connected, one presence, one power, how can anyone pollute Mother Earth? How can anyone harm any other living being? And in our life, in our world today, we have deforestation, we have this pollution, racism, bigotry, animal cruelty, and it's not compatible with this one presence, one power. Furthermore, I want to share with you, see, within children and our companion animals, this one presence and one power just shines so brightly. It's so easy to see. This principle directly relates to our personal diet. And modern science has conclusively linked a whole food plant-based diet with prevention and reversal of disease. Our number one killers: heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, and different forms of cancer. Talking about cancer, in fact, the World Health Organization and this is not coming from my personal bias, it's coming from the scientific consensus. In October of 2015, they said that red meat and processed meat are carcinogens on the same scale as tobacco and pesticides. It's amazing that Charles and Myrtle Fillmore in the 1800s were living already this lifestyle, following a whole food plant-based diet, which by the way is the new paradigm. In fact, in the early 1900s, the Unity Statement of Faith, is coming from Unity. It's been removed from the Unity Statement of Faith, but I still like to think about it. We believe that all life is sacred and that man should not kill or be part of the killing of animal for food. It was removed from the Unity Statement of Faith, but I'd like to share it with you anyways. We have evidence that the 5 longevity hotspots where centenarians occur at the highest rate in the world, like Okinawa, Loma Linda, Sardinia, Greece, and Costa Rica, these cultures follow a whole food plant-based diet, just like the Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. The next unity principle, which is the third unity principle, is validate when you meditate and pray. You heighten your connection with God. There's one thing in the world that we know causes most modern diseases and is responsible for 80% of doctor's visits. So 80% of the people who come to see me is for this one reason, and it's chronic stress. What's the remedy? Meditation and prayer, and we have science that backs this up. Meditation and prayer lowers stress in the body. What do we do when we're engaging in a daily practice of meditation and prayer? Where we're having brain health, we're increasing neurogenesis, we're creating new brain neurons, we're increasing neuroplasticity, we're decreasing anxiety and depression, we're decreasing blood pressure and our heart rate, we're decreasing inflammation in our body through cortisol, we're lowering cortisol, and we're lowering the adrenaline, epinephrine, and norepinephrine, and we're preserving our hormone of youth, DHEA. This has been shown in many studies. Do we have to go to the Himalayan mountains for a year in the lotus posture to accomplish this?
No.
Absolutely not. We have Dr. Benson from Harvard has shown that just 20 minutes a day, a simple breathing exercise, we can activate 1,500 new genes that reduce stress in our body. And when we do this practice, we're stimulating neurons and activating growth and changing our DNA, and this can happen at any age. In our 90s or 100s, studies have shown that we can grow new neurons at any age. What are the 4 main ways to grow new brain cells? It's concentration and meditation, aerobic exercise, novelty, and emotional arousal. How do we get to that space? Well, we have to do what we did this morning. We have to stop, and we have to enter the silent domain. We have to calm our bodies. Which is pretty hard to do in modern culture. There's a lot of running here and there, and not much stopping and just being silent, but that's why I love Unity, because we practice this every day. To finish our third Unity principle, I want to end with this quote. The language of God is silence. Everything else is a poor translation. So why am I giving this talk? This is a quote from Thomas Keating. Our fourth unity principle is experience is created by how we think. And as you see here, anybody seen the new Star Wars? Anybody? Okay. Even in Hollywood, they have the drama of the forces of good and the forces of evil. It's in daily life. And the one presence, one power is part of the Jedi. Who wants to be a Jedi? I want to be a Jedi. And you got the forces of the dark side, the evil. And this is not just Hollywood. Modern psychology has shown us we can create our own experience by our thinking. There's an ancient parable about 2 inmates that were condemned to a life in prison. And each morning, they were sharing the same cell. One would get up and look outside through the jail cell and look down at the worms and the cesspool and the mud and he would be dejected, gloomy, morose, suicidal, very unhappy with his lot in life. And the same inmate would go to the jail cell, look out the window, and look at the expansive sky, the radiant sun, and feel bliss, and feel supremely happy. So just looking at the vista. This is not just an ancient story. Modern studies show that this is true. The classic study is the paraplegic with the person who won the lottery, and we know that 1 year later, they have an equal level of happiness. And this was proven with modern psychology experience from Harvard, Dr. Dan Gilbert, that we create our own happiness. And when we create our own happiness from inside, it's more profound and long-lasting. One way to describe this is self-referral, or happiness comes from within, or object referral, or happiness comes from outside. There was a classic nun study that also showed the profound effects of happiness and optimism. And it took close to 700 nuns who entered the convent in their 20s. And then they analyzed the diary entry over 60 years. And the nuns who had more positive, happy notes in their diary lived 10 years longer. And also the ones that had a more robust vocabulary actually had less dementia. So that was pretty interesting. Scientists are calling this the hedonic treadmill, the pleasure treadmill. If you're on this treadmill, constantly running, constantly consuming things, consuming objects, and the more objects you consume, the more you need to maintain a basic level of happiness. But in Unity, we believe in the power of affirmative prayer and affirmative thought, and that produces our own happiness. And I'll end this Unity principle with a quote that I love from Seneca: "That man is poor, not he who has little, but he who hankers after more." But we don't have to worry about that in Unity, because we create our own happiness. The next principle, the last Unity principle, is there's a spark of divinity in everyone, the Christ consciousness. With this principle, I was talking to my wife, we think of aloha, peace and blessing to you. Think of namaste, the light within me greets the light within you. And when we realize this at a deeper level, that we're all interconnected and there's a divinity in every one of us, then this is where we form our social network. This is where we form our satsang, good association. And we have 100 years of data in science that shows that when you have a social network, it promotes longevity. However, when I think about this principle, I think of the challenge of how do you challenge spending time alone by yourself, the silent domain, and still connecting with other people. So that is our challenge. I love this quote from Psalms 46:10. "Be still and know that you are God." So we first have to be still to recognize that Christ consciousness within us, and then we can see it in others. This next quote, this next slide: "Learn to be alone and to like it. There is nothing more freeing and empowering than learning to like your own company." This is where we find God. This, you can call it the peace that passes all understanding. And this helps promote happiness and longevity. Finally, we come to a cartoon I'll let you read. So I can stand up here, talk about anti-aging, reversing aging, longevity, but there's one universal truth. We all must face Father Time, who's undefeated. So what do we do? Well, we live every day as if it was our last, because one of these days it will be. But the problem is that, not the problem, the solution is, since we know we all will die, well then how do we live the maximum longevity for our bodies. And the human lifespan, the longest lived person in history was 122. And the Okinawans are living to 100, and we have longevity at this church. So, in conclusion, my opinion is that if we could live the 5 unity principles, and this is the concluding slide, if we, as a summary, if we can live the 5 unity principles, we can live our truth, recognize that there's one presence, one power, validate when we meditate every day, experiences created by how we think is where we create our happiness, and we recognize there's a spark of divinity in everyone, we create our social network, we could live a long, happy, and healthy life, like the filmers did in the 1800s, a time that it was unheard of for them to do that. So that's the challenge I have for everyone here in the new year. Live the 5 unity principles, which I'm trying to live every day. And Gandhi, even the great Gandhi, was struggling with and trying to live every day. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.